we could, as we've been starting lately, if we could introduce ourselves. I'm Tracy, as most of you know.
Renee.
Cheryl.
Is Lisa need to go?
Say your name.
Oh, Jane. Jane.
She doesn't have a
Jane.
She doesn't have a name yet.
Marsha. Jane.
Jean.
Leslie. Sue, can you say hello? So we know we can hear you. You're muted though.
Sorry.
Hi.
There you are.
I'm not worried about it.
And Jamie, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Hi, everybody.
You're all very quiet, so I'm gonna see if I can make you louder here. Forgive my thumbs.
Was that a thumbs up?
That's better. We gotta be able to hear you guys. Thank you all for coming, for being here.
Thank you.
And online people, I might have to include an email about this. Renee made a book, hell of a book.
Facsimile.
Look at, I don't know if you can see it.
She made it, she cut it. And then
Cut paper. You might not be able to see it well, but I'll include some pictures.
And it's like the one on the.
Yeah. What was the original book, or should we not know?
A mystery book. Actually, if you, I thought about copying pages out of the real books, put in that book, but those are just extra pages from where I cut out that one. So
It's fantastic.
Oh.
So hell of a book.
They did that.
hell of a book.
Hell of a book.
We're sorry. I'm sorry. Uh-oh.
We're just stuck on
They
names.
were saying- Just ignore this end of the. book.
Yeah, sorry.
She advertising
It's a hell of a pile of name tags.
I know.
I always struggle how to start because I don't want to just
know.
ask you what you thought, because that's not a good way to start a discussion.
Sometimes it works.
But sometimes it works. Hell of a book. The author said that wasn't the title he would have picked, that it was a little too, what was the word he used?
Pompous, I think.
Yeah.
Like, I
Arrogant.
must be better arrogant, yes.
Yes. But the compromise was, the publisher wanted to use hell of a book. The compromise was, he says, the subtitle, the altogether factual, wholly bona fide story of big dreams, hard luck, American-made mad kid. And then the dedication is for all other mad kids.
Mhm.
What do you think that means? Oh.
I think, well, I kind of felt like he was writing somewhat autobiographically. So he was writing, I felt like he was writing from his background. And I think he and many others have, for a long time hid their madness, or were afraid of their anger, or knew that it was not a good thing to show that they were mad or angry. And I don't know if he meant mad like angry mad, or if he meant mad like going crazy mad. But either one would have been not a good thing to display. I pass.
I agree. I thought it was autobiographical to some extent.
Well, it
And,
has to be.
and dreams,
Not be.
yeah. I think he was, he kept hallucinating things, and I think a lot of it was dream sequence, maybe. Just really, I don't know. I think he was all three of the characters too. He was Soot, and he was the kid. So
I agree, but he purposely said he didn't name them
yeah,
because he didn't want it to be identified as only him, only his voice. So I listened to the NPR interview tonight because I needed a refresher, because I read the book a while ago, and after I finished it, I thought I need to start back and reread this book again. Well, I haven't done that yet. And I think it would have helped. But the interview was, I thought, very telling as far as his purpose and writing the book, and that he didn't have a contract for it, that he was going out there and he wrote whatever he wanted. And then he shopped around to find a publisher. So I thought his comments were very revealing of his true thoughts, but yet he didn't want to pigeonhole himself as being the only voice in the book. Next.
I thought it was interesting that, and I understood him not naming, giving a name to himself. That was all about all the other bad kids.
Right.
And then,
Yeah.
but I thought it was really interesting the comment that throughout, it wasn't throughout the whole book, but there were several times when people said, why aren't you writing about Black people? Why aren't you writing about this? And he at one point answered, well, there's a white person, I'll always have to write about white people. There's why are you pigeonholing me? And I thought that was interesting because I don't think that ought to be the case, that he has to always write about Black people, but he wasn't at all. And it was like it was too painful to even think about it. And so he wasn't writing anything. But he ended up, because I had trouble kind of starting this book. I just thought, well, what is this? But it got more and more and more intense in a sense as I went. And I thought, wow, he's really telling us something. And he ended up writing about, like someone said, why aren't you writing about it?
Right.
Yeah.
Did you notice, you mentioned him, saying he wasn't writing about Black people. Did you notice Soot's, I think Soot's father was the artist, but he wasn't drawing Black people. And someone criticized him for that.
Because he couldn't sell it. He wouldn't make money if he just did Black people. But if you talk to any artist, though, painting Black skin is very
Difficult.
very difficult. Yes, Cheryl too. For them to get that right look on a person. I have a few paintings that have been done and Black children, and it's amazing. But I know how difficult that is to paint.
And the degree of Blackness too, that Blacks, if you're too light or if you're too dark, and how well you navigate society makes a difference.
That was part of Soot's problem.
Even amongst Black people themselves, though.
Right. That's
But that I always found rather interesting because I grew up in high school with a young man who was ebony. Oh my God, his skin was gorgeous. I mean, he was what he was talking about. Black is Black, and I mean, but anyone that would look at this young man and I just, it was hard for me to understand how anyone could look at that really dark skin and not think, oh my God, that's gorgeous. There are a lot of people that can't.
2020 is the book for money.
Is it okay if I share? Oh, sure. Well, I didn't know if everybody was done kind of winding down there. I was just amazed with how layered this was, just incredibly layered. It wasn't one point of view or two or three, it was 100. And he managed to maintain that. As I got to about the middle of the book and I thought, oh, he's not going to be able to maintain this to the end. He's not going to be able to be devil's advocate at every turn and write it beautifully, but he did. I was just amazed at his ability to do that, to see it, to see his own experience and the Black experience, a cultural experience for everyone, put it in such perspective, to see it from all sides and voice the argument. I mean, he always had the counter argument or the counter point of view, and it wasn't cardboard. It was just so real and so personal. that he was able to maintain all those points of views and understand them and present it to me as a naive white person to all of that. I mean, I would like to think I'm not as naive as some, but he gave it a depth that, and I've read a lot about the Black experience, and but he gave it a depth that I haven't experienced quite yet. It was really, really full. And I was very impressed with the writing and his ability to do that right to the very last sentence. So.
I just got all these upset about all the drinking that he had to do to get through so much of what he was experiencing. Wow, that's too bad.
Maybe I wonder if that was at all autobiographical.
Yeah, I know. Saying I did too. I tried to find more information about him and about his background, but I didn't get a feel that I could find anything particularly that addressed that issue.
Mm-hmm.
Are you talking about the issue of whether he was Soot or not? I mean, the author had those same experiences as Soot. Is that what you're asking?
No, I was talking about his drinking. You know, there were so many episodes of
Sure.
When he got fed up with all of it, he turned to alcohol, and
Yeah.
That made me sad.
Yeah. Do you think for the purposes of this book, he's deliberately kept his own personal information under wraps so that people aren't going to press him and say, well, what part of the book is really your experience? I mean, that's just so irritating to an author, I think. They want the book to stand on its own. So maybe he's deliberately done that.
Well, he makes comments about how irritating it is, even in the book, to have
Yes.
to go to the author things and be asked,
Right.
well, you know, story and whatnot. So,
Right.
So yeah, then you kind of wonder, thinking, well, maybe he didn't really want any of this to be a part of who he really is, other than obviously he's Black and he's watched Black people get shot and all that other stuff.
People, the drinking, you know, to cover, he was constantly denying his pain.
Right. Oh yeah.
So
No, I mean, I
drinking-
understand why
yeah.
he's doing it. It just,
Like that.
it's too bad that he always felt that he had to turn to alcohol to,
Yeah.
you know, every now and then his Kellys would help him through some of it, but not all the time.
The Kellys. I forgot the Kellys.
Yeah.
I love the references that he made quite a few of references to things that we all know about. One of them, of course, was Billie Holiday and the Strange Fruit. And comments about that. And there was another one. There was this one I just love. That really puts the cheese on the hamburger. Anybody heard that expression? No, I hadn't. I thought that was great. But yeah, he talks about Strange Fruit with Billie Holiday, which was horrendous. As you can see, I was making notes on a magazine that was sitting next to me. Only Love Can Empty.
Well, she's looking for that. I can give you a piece of information about Strange Fruit. Billie Holiday didn't write that. It was written by a Jewish writer who actually had adopted the Rosenberg's children. You know, the children that the couple that was executed for being spies.
Yeah.
He adopted the boys, he and his wife. And so this is the Jewish writer who wrote Strange Fruit. So it has a very interesting history, that song. But anyway, just an aside.
But it didn't really come to the forefront until Billie Holiday put it.
That's right. That's right.
Any other comments on how it was written? Did we like his style? Was it confusing? Some have said it took a little bit to get into.
It's not my favorite style to read, but I'm not sure this book could have been written in any other style, if that makes sense. You know, I would not pick it up because I like the stream of consciousness type thing, but it had to have been.
But I love the silhouettes. You know, we knew when we were reading about soot, because, and then we knew when we were
Yeah,
talking,
the little silhouettes. at the beginning of the
they always
chapter.
told you at the beginning of the chapter what you were going to be reading about. So that was, that was helpful for me.
That took me a while to pick up on that though.
Oh,
But it's just the kind of thing you don't notice when you open the chapter.
right,
But
right.
I really like
I
this.
picked up on it right away.
His words just cascade. You're falling into that same vortex that this unnamed author is in all the time. I mean, it's, and there's so many words coming at you all the time and feelings in that it's just, I thought he did a remarkable job of building that tension. There was one place, do you remember the rant from, there were so many true things in here. Like didn't you just love the culture crew? What was that called?
Yes.
The people came into the office and handed out donuts to try to keep the employees there. And wasn't that just like a SNL skit or something? And then, but the words just kept it was just almost like farce. And it's running down the hotel room hallway naked.
Yeah.
And then I just
When
thought,
I got in the elevator.
yeah, and I just thought, those words just kept coming, and then there was that word ramp, just a cavalcade of words from the person, the TV, the media guy, who's trying to train an author how to be an author on tour. And, he has this entire paragraph of current pop culture, but it's not just pop culture. These are all, well, many of them are serious things, but he just lines them up and it makes it all seem compressed. And we have all of these issues and we're not doing anything about any of them.
Right.
Nothing. But here he is, omni-restitutional, jingoistic, body positive, social, cultural, transcendental, indigenous, repostic, treaty of Fort Laramie perpendicular, meta exculpatory. And then it goes on and on. Demi-Arcadian bucolic. I'm sure these are authors' words. He's got to be this, but it doesn't happen. And then you end up with a dispossessed, neo-global, cultural demographic committed at the hands of a one-time, possibly improprietous proto-nation. And he says, is that me? Like neo-global dispossessed blacks or refugees or whatever. And the issues of words, it's funny, but it's really cumulative. And things come to a head and it just finishes. And so I just think it's great.
Yeah. So someone already mentioned, Renee already mentioned layering, but that's what it felt like. It just felt like it kept building. And you thought, oh boy, it's coming. It's so relevant.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons he starts out is with the conversation about not mentioning blacks, and you have the dad not drawing blacks, because it's the world they live in. And so, or you could start to take this almost as a universal. Everybody has traumas, not everybody, many people have traumas that sends them off onto a psychotic path, separation from reality in that terms of psychosis. But and so this could be a white story as well as a black story. It doesn't really have to be a black story, but the anger levels, the issues, the mad kids, it just simply can't be tamped down anymore. So eventually it has to become a book about black, and it can't stay a book about white, because this is not their story, or at least it's just not there. Even if you've suffered the trauma of, white people suffer trauma as well, but this has to become the black story, because that's who this person is, and it's what he is keeping in until it explodes. He stands up at the TV station.
Right.
Yeah.
But did you pick up on, though, a lot of times listening when he was talking about soot or the imaginary kid, he was always saying, you need to be you, and he reiterated that enough times through the book that I was suddenly starting to ring Mr. Rogers in my head. You need to just be you and not worry about what everything else is going on around about you. And anyway, I found that was kind of through the whole book he kept, because he started out right away with soot saying, quit worrying about what everybody else thinks about you. What do you think about yourself? And then then Mr. Rogers sort of zinged into my head. Because that to me was always the greatest thing about Mr. Rogers, was always, he didn't care who you were or what you did or anything. He just always made you feel good about being yourself. I like that part of the book.
Yeah, I took a lot of that as his finally coming. I mean, clearly this is a book of reckoning with himself. I sort of took all of that as he hadn't yet absorbed that lesson. He's becoming you, he's becoming himself.
Yes.
The who he is
Yeah.
in this book, in this journey. He's finally coming to grips with it, and so he's the you. You have to be who you are, and he's finally figuring out who he is.
Yeah.
And because he's not there yet. This is like a cathartic. I don't know. Is this a quest novel or journey? I guess it's a journey.
It was also interesting with the publisher, where he talked about the publisher for a little bit, and she said, well, if you don't keep selling books, what's going to happen.
Right.
And
Right.
we've had other discussions with other books about publishing and how that affects who gets published and who doesn't, and how often. And so he was trying to be this person he was supposed to be for the publisher and write what he's supposed to write for the publisher. And in real life, he also decided not to do that, and ended or decided not to continue the contract and be who he needed to be to write this book. Because he doesn't. I think he didn't think he'd ever get this published.
Yeah,
True.
I don't remember if it was the public radio interview or another one where he said this was just more for him. It was
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
passion thing. He didn't really think other people would
Right.
want to read it, let
Right.
alone.
He
it's
was
won
very
awards.
surprised.
Yeah.
When
Yeah. Yeah. But it also sounds like because of that, like he had important things to say, but he also was able to have fun with it and fun with
Right.
language and, play with it more than he would have had he been under contract to write a certain specific.
It was cute how every time we met people, they'd all say, oh, that was a hell of a book.
Yeah.
It's a hell of a book. I mean, through the whole thing, it was everybody said, oh, that was a hell of a book. And again, such a play on words with the title as well. That was pretty cute.
Do we ever know what the book he wrote in
the fictional
the fictional book was?
Yes.
The book? I have a book in the book?
I have it, and it's sitting, it's the first book he wrote as a real live author was called The Returned.
I was reading that back.
And it was, yes.
Made
it
into a
was,
TV show, is that?
and he was working at a Verizon call center when his book went best-selling. So we went from, kind of like the call center in the book to best-selling author on week-long tours. And it was made into that book was made into a series, a TV series called Resurrection. And it sounds a little odd about people like that have died, but at one point they all start coming back.
I just had ordered one of his books. I can't remember which one it was though, but it isn't his first one. But yeah, I'm curious to read something else that he's written.
Yeah, I imagine it's going to be different.
Yeah, I thought in that NPR interview that this book was not anything like the other books he's ever written.
So whose father really was shot?
Yeah, that's a good question
No
too.
one's going to answer. Maybe Jamie.
What do you think,
Jamie? Whose father was really shot? Soot, the kid, the authors?
I don't think it matters, but
Oh, sorry.
I don't know. For some reason, I don't think it matters. But as I was reading it, I felt that it was Soot's father. That the experience was with the uncle was Soot's experience, but then it could have been the kid who was shot. It became important in terms of the theme that it could have been anybody. It could have been any Black person that this happened to. That it was the universality of the experiences was what was so important. And so that's why I say it doesn't really matter. At first, I was kind of following it and it had a plot and I was kind of hooking things onto certain characters. And then all of a sudden I realized what he was really saying, the deeper end of it. And then it became less important. That these are experiences that a Black boy or a Black man will experience. You can guarantee that this Black person will have these experiences and 100 more in their lifetime. And we better get that.
He hit several times on so many things that are actually happening today or have happened today. And the one quote, and of course, I'm not sure if this was in the part when he went to the autopsy with Kelly, and that was on the bizarre side. But the one thing that really made me again just think, oh my gosh, he says dead kids don't linger on the brain like they used to.
Yeah.
And it's
Oh, yes.
it just hit with not only the shootings of the butt, but it's also our school shootings right now. You know, we get all worried about them and we get together on them, and then suddenly nothing gets done, and it just goes away until the next shooting. And it's like, oh my gosh. And then, well, of course, he wrote this in 21, so he'd already knew enough about school shootings and the black cop shoot, you know, all that stuff. But yeah, that I think is the thing that is so disturbing today, is that we see this over and over and over again, and we just don't do anything, or nothing gets done, or we don't know what to do.
That hit me too when he was talking about it a few times where he himself, and I feel it too, like you get immune to it a little bit. You can't do anything. You feel overwhelmed. So you feel bad and you put it aside. And some of the names he mentioned, I don't remember, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Like he mentioned, there's so many.
He did.
On so many, and eventually you lose the names. Yeah. That was very sad. I did like how in the end he did talk about, you know, how you're saying it doesn't really matter if they're who's who or if they're connected. I think he sums it up well right here in one iteration. He's talking about Soot. In one iteration of this, he is a boy that goes on to become a writer who tours and drinks and dreams. In another iteration, he is a child who dies and yet somehow finds a way to go on. In another still, he is a child who goes on to become a writer who hides so deeply in his characters that the story he tells of them becomes muddled in the story he fears to tell of himself. So he throws in dashes of truth among the lies until even he cannot tell which is which. Yes, that kind of summed up what he was doing with the author and Soot and the kid, and are they connected? Are they not? Does it matter?
Has any other author written anything in this kind of genre or way of doing it? I mean, if this is really revolutionary for Jason to have written this book.
Like in what ways do you mean?
Just kind of what you just said. You know, we get to the end of this book and we have no idea where the author stands in that. I mean, I know other authors who do, like I said, some are autobiographical. Yeah. They take things from their lives, but we somehow know it better.
Maybe
done and kind of in the dark.
Writing from the point of view of the author experience, you know, sort of like a meta writing, if you will, you know, a meta novel in terms of writing from his. I thought that was so telling, you know, that he was sharing his own author's experience about how people, when they want you to sign their book and how they approach you, and hearing all of that maybe the only person I've read is Philip Roth, who's done that, writing about a writer.
Maybe some of the ones that are on the back might be authors to look at, just because if.
Oh, that's true.
If,
You're right, like,
you know,
interior China.
That was one I was going to mention, because this won the National Book Award, and last year we won the year before, the 2020 Book Award winner, Interior Chinatown.
Yeah.
And that completely different, but did anyone see any
Story and a
similarities? That kind of, yeah.
And the combining, he does it so well, the combining of what's real and not real. And of course, he himself he sets us up within the first few pages that he's a totally unreliable narrator. Totally unreliable. But we don't really know talks about his condition. And of course, it turns out to be, of course, the something traumatic in childhood. But he is authoring things. He's making stories up. That's what authors do, even if they're nonfiction. Essentially, you're pulling things together and you're putting your cast on them. You're putting stories together. You've got television in here, and you're presenting some sort of picture of yourself. That's why he has to be coached into how to behave and what to say and what not to say. And don't ever pretend that, and you are your book. So what's real and what isn't real? And in Interior Chinatown, it's the same thing. You've got a TV show going on and it's all in script. It's all written like it's a TV script. And so what's real and what isn't real? And how do we process that? And if you're already tripping down that path of not knowing and you're adding alcohol to it, quite frankly, I took half of the people in years not even existing. I mean, how many Kellys can there be that he sleeps with?
Who's the movie star that he's talking to on the early?
Oh, yeah.
Nicholas Cage.
And in some ways it reminded me, I'm not in a few ways, the beautiful ruins, which I wasn't here for that discussion, but in many, that is also, you've got real life and you've got a movie script. You've got the celebs who are real people, but they act like they're in a movie. And you've got this funny little Italian man who couldn't possibly be real, but but there's so many ways of intertwining what's real and what isn't real, so that you as a reader, you have to sort it out. But what he does remarkably well is he carries you on that journey of that psychotic meltdown, of that feeling, that inner plot that just explodes from him, and he can't contain it any longer, because this is what he's doing. He's writing a book to find out who he is. And is he even writing a book? I don't know what's going on in here. He's so unreliable.
Did you if you go to his website, which I did, and he makes another reference to Nicolas Cage, that if you see him or whatever, it's like, really? Oh my gosh.
But if you think about Nicolas Cage's movies, there are a lot of things like that. Raising Arizona is off the wall.
Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
And didn't you do the one where it's two faces? I can't remember the name.
Yes.
Who's real and who isn't real? And he's such different characters in all of his movies. I think he's like almost a perfect choice of, and was he really on the airplane with him, or was he just dreaming?
Exactly.
Right.
Was he just having an imaginary conversation with an imaginary celebrity who's real but not real? Because you can't tell who Nicolas Cage is. Besides that, he's Coppola's nephew or something, and he doesn't even use that name.
Right.
So I don't know. I just think he does a remarkable job of pulling us with him and being at the same time sympathetic, because he's funny. He's funny. He's a person you'd like to know.
He has some tours coming up too, and I told he's gonna be in Raleigh, North Carolina, which my neighbor lives in Raleigh. I was gonna tell her she should go.
She could go and just see.
Wouldn't you love to just hear him talk? Because like I said, this Nicolas Cage thing, he's put it in there, but then all of a sudden you read it on his website that this is someone he really does want to meet and know. So then you're going, okay, once again, like I said, what's real, what isn't real.
Yeah, that's funny about going to Zoom, because in the book he said people rarely go to the office websites.
Maybe he put that in there on purpose.
But he did. That was a funny thing. There's just a lot in here that I just find his writing absorbing. I really, really like this book. I don't know how many more like it I could read, but this one just really hooked me, and I thought he did just an incredible job of putting us in that same boat. Eventually to feel that what he was feeling, to watch him come to that level of explosion, and then try to come off it. And he's been psychoanalyzed, and he won't talk about his problems because he does all of that fake movie talk. Doll face and how you doing it. And he says right up front, he just has superficial conversations with everybody because he doesn't have any idea what's going on.
But I go to their websites because they always put this great picture of them. Yeah. I always like to go to the website to see if they've actually got some real human pictures of them. They had only, as far as I could tell on his website, there was just one of him. And he, to be quite frank, he does not look necessarily like this picture that they always do. No, he looks much thinner here, and maybe he's younger here. I don't know. But I always like to see pictures. So sometimes I just Google them to see if I can find more real pictures of them, not all glamored up like they put on them.
Another thing that I thought was quite well done, cleverly done. He's so absorbed and his life is so crazy, what with the limos and the week-long tours and the drinking and the hotels. He doesn't even know where he is half the time.
And
It's
Randy.
the fact that you never hear a complete news story about which kid's been killed, which brings, to me, goes back to about the universality of it, or the constant killing of somebody that's so, it's always sad. And, it's always thoughts and prayers. And then there's always the bereaved parents. But by never finishing the story, it just rolls into the next story. And sometimes it's hard to tell which shooting he's actually talking about, because we've got so many. But that unfinished, he's always interrupted just before they tell him who the kid is. So he has to pretend that he's concerned about the kid. And to me, that just reinforces what you were saying, how we do it over and over and over. And it just doesn't sink in after a while. We don't even get the facts straight. They just blur because it's just a constant background noise. I think it does that well.
What I was trying to quite figure out were Rennie, because remember, Rennie's the limo driver, and then all of a sudden he takes him to his home, and he's obviously made a lot of money, and he's very.
So Remy's doing it for fun, interest.
Exactly, I think he's trying to show that not all Black people are, yeah. But I like the way he did that, though. I mean, he made it, Rennie was taking care of him, he's throwing up all over the place, and Rennie was cleaning up after him and all that, and yet, Rennie's living in a mansion and didn't have to be doing this, but.
I saw Remy sort of as his, isn't there a guide, like in Virgil? You saw him as that guide. He's guiding him around, and he's trying to help him.
Yeah.
Gives him advice and says, you gotta quit drinking, man.
Yeah.
And he does come back in some of his visions.
And he came back in
Uh-huh.
some of his visions.
I just like the angel and It's a Wonderful Life.
It's not, I mean, it's not an unheard of device is to have a Greek chorus or a guide. This, and it doesn't have to be like front and center. It just is. You come across these people who can maybe act as a guide in your life, but you're not ready to hear them, perhaps, or I don't know.
I thought page 290 kind of was really telling. So he's talking to his the mother, universal mother.
Oh, yeah.
The universal child who was killed. And she says it, finally she says, well, if you believe all you say, why didn't you do something? And he says, you know why. And he says, you know how it is. It just gets too big, all of it. Stacks up every effing day, and none of us can make a dent in it. So we just sort of move through it without ever letting it get its hooks in. It's survival. It's how you stay sane. It's how you stay alive. And there ain't no way to change that. Sad. But I think that's what a lot of people do. You feel like you can't do any, like, what can I do about it? And you feel frustration and depression. And you think, oh, what am I going to do? And then you don't think about it because that's just easier.
What happens when there's
Sad.
19 of them?
Yeah.
I mean, he's always talking
There
basically
were already
one.
26.
What?
There were already 26 10 years ago.
And it's,
In his own small way, he puts a lie together. He's saying it's too big a deal. We can't fix it. What can I do? He's fixing himself in this book. That is a huge deal that he did. So he himself is fixing himself in this book, and he started from a position where he wasn't sure that that's. I don't think he set out on that journey, looking at the book, set out on the journey deliberately. I think he finds himself ending up on that journey. But he fixes himself. He tries.
That's another thing that came at the beginning and then finally at the end about this is a love story. Wasn't that interesting?
Yeah. And it's love
So
of
it's learning to
himself.
love himself.
Who you are. That's that Mr. Rogers business again.
Yeah.
But, and all of that made him who he is and able to write whatever book he wrote.
Do you see this translating itself into another medium? to reach a different
Yeah.
audience.
When I read
And
it, I
then
saw a movie.
What would it be? A movie? I wondered about a play.
The Coen brothers directing it.
Oh, okay. I hadn't thought of
Guys
the
that
Coen
did
brothers.
Brother, Where Art Thou, or whatever.
Well, Nicolas Cage would be in the movie.
Yeah.
But I thought of that. Well, I just thought, did he set off thinking this was gonna be optioned for,
No, I don't think. he
right?
did.
Or was this just a whole life passage for himself as he was
Something had
writing?
to write. Yeah, I don't
And then I
think-
thought, well, would I want to go to a play of this book, not having read the book, and even having read the book? Am I sure I really understood everything that I read? So then I just thought, well, I'll ask the group what they think.
I kind of like your idea of a play though,
I do
like something
too.
about it being performed on a stage.
Ethereal.
fits, You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think of Our Town, you know,
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah.
but I don't know, I don't know, I was curious what other people
Interesting
thought.
idea.
But the Coen brothers is an interesting.
Yeah.
idea.
A lot of books I read, I'm already thinking who would play what role or whatever. But, I think, you'd have to suspend reality before you go to a movie like that.
Oh, yeah,
Your sense of reality.
but you kind of do with the Coen brothers
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
Just-
I think this would be overwhelming as a movie. The visually in it, movies just really suck you in. That's why we like them. I think plays, you're already at a distance, and not that they aren't emotionally engaging. I don't, but to me, they're really not even the same. The performances, but they're different. But one is just so much closer, and there's so many more effects.
Well,
Then
and
the
the
mere,
dialogue.
the barest of dialogue you can have
Yeah.
set and so forth.
Yeah.
But I think this would make a great Nicolas Cage movie.
I wonder if he's been asked that question, in his interviews.
Has anyone seen the latest Nicolas Cage movie or a preview of it?
No,
Which one is it?
You've seen the movie or the,
What am using? Yeah.
is it? It's kind of meta too, isn't it? Like it's him
Yeah.
being an actor.
Oh, yes, that's
Right,
right.
he's playing himself, but it's not really
Yeah.
real.
Yeah.
It's just an imagined situation, but it was very fun.
What's the name of it? I can't remember. I do remember the
I've
reviews.
forgotten also.
it wasn't being Nicolas Cage or something like that, was
But
it?
it's close. But that's like being
It was
John
like
Malkovich.
that.
I'll look.
Yeah.
But
It was
the-
like
the
something
city
like
like
that.
that.
That's a good.
Yes.
Yeah. But Nicolas Cage it's just interesting, and what a wonderful, it was like a perfect choice of an actor to show up in here. I mean, I kept thinking too of, he mentioned Schrodinger's cat.
Oh,
Schrodinger's cat.
Schrodinger's.
Yeah, so whatever it is. And the cat's dead or not dead in the box, and you don't know, and it changes when you open it, and it's like quantum physics. It's something can exist that are parallel universes. That's pretty well established. We got parallel universes here. I mean, is he in the same plane, same universe, and things? The minute you start to measure something, it changes. But the mere act of measuring it, it changes it. And that's part of, I can't wrap my head around that, but that's part of what quantum physics is and mechanics is. Physically, it's one thing until it's not that thing. And it may be because you measured it. Or the cat's alive until you open the box and maybe the cat is dead. I mean, I just kept thinking of who's what's real and what's not real. Is the telling of the story changing the story? I think it allows him to the positive outcome by telling the story. What's it do for the others? Changing it is it going to change the story for how Black people are treated in this country? That kind of story. I don't know. But I kept thinking of all these other things that are similar in nature. That things things aren't either or. Things are this, and then sometimes they're this, and then sometimes they're this, and you might never know the difference. I don't know. I just saw
That
some
might be
things.
part of what he meant when he said he just, on the interview, that he just decided to have fun with it and try these kinds of things that he'd been thinking about in terms of words and phrases and putting things together. He really was playing with it a lot, wasn't he?
And I can't imagine anybody else taking his words and transferring them to another media.
Yeah.
I couldn't see a scriptwriter doing that. and really understanding what he wanted to do.
If
By
you
the
were
way,
with
it's the unbearable weight of massive talent.
Yes. Oh, that's, he's just so good. He's like, he's
But
just,
it's
There you go, Nicolas
interesting,
Cage.
when I was cutting this book out though, and it was I had a hard time because I knew I wanted a boy. You know, there were lots of black silhouettes of adults and all kinds of different things. I knew I wanted a boy. And there were lots of boys that had hair, which would make them not feel so black. And his little guy looks like he's in shorts. So when you just look at the front of this book before you even know that it's about a black child somewhere in this book. You know, he's done that with whoever, I can't, who did his book cover, I don't know. It tells us. But, and I couldn't figure out, you know, are these mountains? Are these waves?
Are they layers, like Jamie says?
Just layers, yeah, exactly.
is it a torn up story that no longer is whole?
Yeah.
Or a story that was interrupted on the way to being complete?
He needs to be here to answer all these questions.
Who recommended this for us to read?
This came as a recommendation from a friend of mine in another book appointment. We didn't read it, but she said she devoured it and really wanted to discuss it.
And I read it pretty early.
And then, yeah, I think I have,
It did.
yeah, I
I
have a
know,
couple of your
we
previews.
we were and we were sort of talking about it a bit. We were uncertain exactly, because I hadn't finished it, I don't think. But yeah, I was pleased. I think it's
I know.
It's
you
just
wouldn't-
hard not to
there's
say
nothing
that.
else you can say after you know the title of it.
yeah. I think the use of humor was a surprise to me. I
It's
mean,
really
you know, it
funny.
starts out, and given the subject matter, how heavy it is, how important it is to who we are as a country, and let alone if you're a black male. I mean, so, but then the level of humor, the type of humor, is the farcical nature, some of it, and the silliness, and the falling down drunk. I just thought not that that's funny, but all of those things brought in together seems to alleviate some of the seriousness, but I think it helps us engage also. So I don't know, is that deliberate so that you get a different audience other than just angry black people? You know, is he deliberately engaging those of us who are not this person, or
That are not black.
yeah, or is it because it's so full of anger you need to balance that? And I think that's part of it. This is a book about deep-seated anger that needs a place to be put, and because it can't reside in your gut or you explode. So I do think that humor maybe alleviates some of that.
Well, and he said originally he set out just to write a comedy about how absurd these book tours had been. But like some of the issues in the world around him with race and identity, he couldn't ignore. And I think in one of the interviews, he said he spent his lifetime avoiding writing a book like this, but he couldn't avoid it anymore. So I can barely imagine the book he first wrote without the race issues or anything in it.
Yeah.
That would have been an interesting read.
I like that he set himself up as having this problem as a child of, seeing imaginary people or seeing things that other people don't see. That's the curse and the blessing of an author, really, creating these lives that become very real to them if they're good at what they do. They all say that, is that these characters have a life of their own and they talk to them. Have you all seen the movie about Charles Dickens where he talks to his characters? I can't remember what it's called, but it's really, really good. So I highly recommend taking a look at that. But I liked that device that he set that up early on as being a problem for the child, and the funny scenes of going through, with the counselors and dealing with it, and being on meds for a while, and all of that. And one thing that was just heartbreaking and and funny all at the same time was his big TV interview where he had imagined it, and then it's just starting. It was already over in his mind. And then it was just starting, and he said, well, why are you asking me that, what the book is about? We've already been talking for an hour. So I thought that's just so typical of so many writers, really, that I know that they have these experiences in their heads, and I think they've had them with you already. So I thought that was very well explained and explored in that scene. But so many little things like that in the book were just so well done.
I think he wrote that part rather well, because I thought I missed something. I went back like, did I miss the interview? Did it happen? But that's what he was saying.
Yeah, I did too.
To him. Yeah.
And he mentions a couple of times, both in story, I think, and how stories are powerful. That you can, listening to the preach about when the dad was shot, the whole story. Stories are a very powerful way of communicating. And so here we have an author, and who became that author? It's all mixed up, like the section you read, who's who, but stories have power. Mm-hmm. And we know that Shakespeare stories have power, Aesop stories have power. Stories have power, and I think this is a book about a story as well. That this is a story, and it's a powerful story. I thought that there were, as she said, Jamie said, there's so many pieces and pulling things together. I think as well. I did read a rather scathing review of it. Did you see that online? It's about somebody who was on the what award did this win? It was just the National Book Award. And he's on that committee, or was on that committee, and boy, he took them all to task because he said this is just a sentimentalism, that it's emotional setup, and that we shouldn't even be bothered with it. But the real problem with it is the award givers, is because they took out used to be almost 100% literary writers. Now they've added librarians and publishers. And they have essentially ruined.
Well, gosh.
Yeah, I know. Take that.
Librarian.
Take that. So that it's much more about it. They want much more accessibility, and much more publishing interest, and more selling, as opposed to the literary writers who just, look at other things. But so he really took it to task as essentially a piece of sentimentalism that had no business winning such an
I
award.
wouldn't think this is non-literary.
I know it was that he was just.
Easy book to
Mm-hmm. He thinks it's just too many
fly through.
But, I think it's just I don't agree with that. It was just an interesting take, because it is certainly emotional. But I think he carries us with that emotional journey, which I think is a legitimate journey of figuring out who you are, whether it's that depth of the trauma that he suffered, or maybe what our culture is suffering. Maybe we need to look at things differently. And maybe this is the story that will help us.
We have never even mentioned soot becoming invisible.
Right.
Because I just kept thinking, what a way of a child to, his goal is to be invisible.
Well, there are, and I've heard it from Black friends that they go over with their children what to do if they're stopped by cops or. I mean, it's frightening to think that you have to teach your children, and don't wear, you've got your hood up, make sure you take your hood down. I mean, just things that are just unbelievable that we of this color just have no idea what it would be like. I've always thought, wouldn't it be fun if we could just make everybody have to reverse their color just for 2 or 3 days and just see what it would be like to be in that other person's shoes and not be privileged white like we are right now.
There's a very, very old book, I think was written in the 50s or 60s, called Black Like Me.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
That's somebody that actually did that took melanin, oily, and changed the color of his skin physically, and then lived that life and wrote about it.
I had my boys read that, and my husband. One summer, I made all three of them read it, and we talked about it. It was, gosh, my boys were probably 12 and 14 or something.
Yeah, it is. And there, and talking about having to tell your children how to behave in a culture that they shouldn't have to be like that. Who wrote that book, Letters to My Son? Coat? Was it Coat?
Yeah,
Something.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he wrote a whole book about letters. I don't remember what it was.
That was really a powerful book.
Yeah.
It didn't have any humor in it, but it basically was saying the same thing.
Yeah.
What was the name of that?
Letters to my
I think,
son.
I
Oh,
think Letters to My Son is right. But I don't think that's right, but it was
I don't
written by
remember.
Coates, who's a well-known author and, activist thinker.
Mhm.
And he
Yeah.
was right.
It was, you can look, I forget the title is Ta-Nehisi Coates
Yeah,
was the author.
Coates' book, and I just don't remember the name of it off. The correct name. It's clearly a problem. I mean, it's more than a problem. It's life threatening for people. And there's so little to do about it. And it's just so frustrating. Voting doesn't do anything.
Between the world and me.
Was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Between the world and me.
Between the world and
That was, for anybody that's been
Thank you.
with a lot. Very early on.
Yeah.
I know I read it, but I didn't remember what book. It would not have been one I would have picked up, so I don't remember if we did it.
So this is, it's not a new topic. I think his approach is different from a lot of the other approaches, because it's not just a straight narrative. There are probably many books that speak about this problem, and I've read some, I just can't think of them, but this approach is quite different. I think it draws you in differently because it doesn't seem to be what you expect when you open it up and get engaged in the story. It doesn't, I'm not sure that you expect it to go where it goes.
Very slow, like that repetition of the news, the child being very slow. And it piles it up.
And I don't know about others, I never read the blurb. It just drives me nuts.
I always read it.
Oh, I never read the blurb because I don't want to know where the story's going. I want it to unfold because I think they give too much away.
Yeah, I often read the last chapter.
Oh,
I read 2 chapters and then I read the last chapter.
No, I don't. I do that only when bored.
I don't know.
And that's
if that would
why it's
matter
hard
with
for
this
me.
one.
It's hard
Yeah,
for me to
you
read
wouldn't
on
know
my
how you got it.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to read on my Kindle because I can't do that.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would like to see a movie and read a book. That's never, a lot of people don't want to read the book after they've seen the movie or seen it. And either way, I like both of them. Generally, there's enough difference too between how they've done it. And sometimes they're very much right on, spot on. I guess maybe that's what I like to see if they really followed the book.
Yeah.
One other thing that I thought was interesting about the book is how he was talking about people always saying you should write about this, you should write about that, you should write about the Black experience, and and him resisting and saying, why is that my responsibility? Essentially, other things that I've read are saying it's not the responsibility of Black people to teach us about all of this. It's our responsibility to look into it and find out. Don't put the burden on them to be our teachers necessarily. And yes, if we don't have them write about it, then who will be our teachers? But at the same time, you have to understand that burden. And I think he really expressed it well.
Mm-hmm. Did anyone find any hope in this book? Is it hopeful moments?
I actually made a note on that. Teaching? Because he was teach somebody hope.
It does say at the end that we're going to make it. We're going to be okay. You might feel that this turned into a love story. I don't feel much hope for the culture, but for our character.
And of course, I can't.
That he's going to
But I made
have
that
his
note about
come to
hope.
Jesus moment about drinking. Because he does say he didn't even really much drink until he went on that book.
Yeah. It's kind of weird to go from not drinking to drinking so much, but.
I just thought the device at the end was interesting too, just that strange music dialogue with the two silhouettes coming together.
Yeah.
That was. You know, it's an interesting device. It's clearly, it becomes almost poetry-like, but it clearly emphasizes his pieces, his, what he's pushing and but it's real. In reality, it's something you continue to struggle with. Throughout all of this, you still haven't used his name, his real name, I mean, or your own for that matter. What else could we do?
On page.
Well, and
I was gonna go with hope. Go ahead.
okay, I'll finish this thought on this and we'll go back to hope, because we want some hope in here.
Yes,
What I found interesting about this, mine is large print, so it's really big. But I read this, but I also have the audio. And the audio book did the boys, all of the boys line.
Oh.
And then
Didn't go
all
back
of
and forth.
yeah, it didn't go back and forth, which
It needs to.
it actually made it kind of a different
It
take
does.
on it.
different
Yeah,
ending.
yeah.
In fact, I wasn't quite sure how to read it either when I
Yeah.
got to there, but then I realized I need to read one side and then touch the
Yeah, you
other.
go back
Yeah.
and forth.
See, and when you read the last chapter first, you have multiple times to
Yeah.
check that out.
Check that out.
All right, what did you find on hope?
Well, it was starting in 81. It's when Stood is talking, and it's talking about William, who was his father. And William wanted his son to have hope for as long as he could. And I think that was really what, even though, you know, they were teaching you things to survive in the world and all this sort of thing. William couldn't bring himself to take away his son's optimism any faster than the world was already taking it away. I mean, I really felt that his parents, because of their caring about him so much, really, they had hope that maybe he would grow up and not. So yes, there were often times I did feel hopeful. I even felt hopeful with the author every now and then talking about things that he was doing in his book. I felt like he kept going, yes, maybe there's, not that he ever really quite got there, but that,
Maybe he will.
Mm-hmm.
We should wrap up soon. Online folks, any thoughts that you haven't been able to share yet?
No, but thank you. I love hearing everybody's thoughts on this. You guys are such avid readers, all so well read. I love everything that you bring to these discussions. Thank you so much, all of you.
And I think there was hope because it makes you so aware of the discrimination, and it's talked about so much more. And we're reading books like this, which really helps to see what it's like, to live as a Black person. And he said, be kind to yourself, even when the country isn't. And so I think the country is becoming more aware and trying to do better.
I love the way he started with the little boy hiding behind the couch. I mean, what parent could not relate to that? He kept trying to get us to relate to their lives. And I think the fact that he never solved some of the issues, it's just a constant relearning and re-informing people of what's going on. And I think there's hope in that. He's not giving up. That's the theme I got out of it. He was not going to give up.
Right. I took a lot of notes. There's fear. You can't break the cycle for Black people. But then the love story, learning to love yourself, a story of his life, really. I mean, I joined late. I mean, I think it was autobiographical, of course. And you get the message over and over in different ways. So Black people are treated differently. Their life is affected by their skin color, and not fairly. And it keeps affecting. It's a burden. And then he talked about how he was coping and how people cope. Description of racism on page 208 and several places. So good to make people aware of discrimination, but I wondered if he had a negative attitude, but I thought, well, he was being realistic. And I did get that feeling too of anger that somebody mentioned, the deep anger. And I thought it was well written. It made you think about all those things, and Suit and the boy and the father and the incident with the uncle.
Is it a hell of a book?
And I liked that it wasn't long.
Right,
He
yeah.
packed a lot in 300 pages.
Yeah, if his editor pushed for calling it a hell of a book, I thought that was very clever. I thought it really worked.
Because it kept coming up in the dialogue.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I got really sick of hearing that.
So is this one you would recommend to others?
Yes.
To readers,
Well, yes.
not to someone who's just looking for a book.
No, yeah, that's
Does
true.
that make, you
A
know?
quick read or just
Yeah.
a fun read.
Yeah,
It's
someone,
not a
you know,
beach read.
yeah, it's not a
I
beach
don't
read.
think it's a beach read.
It's a-
But I do think it's
I'm
a.
gonna
Yeah.
buy it as a gift.
Are you? Okay, good.
Yeah.
We've got our stars.
We got our stars.
We're gonna rate them. People online, if you want to tell us what you think, or
Is it 1 to 5?
1 to 5, 1 being low, 5 being high. I forgot markers.
I'd give it a 4.5.
4.5. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. There. Before I turn it in.
I put all my stickies out.
Did you put
There you go.
There you go.
All right, well, next month, July 6th, will be after July 4th already. Her Hidden Genius by Marie Benedict. So hopefully you all can make it and we can have a good discussion for that.
Do you have the book?
Yeah, I do have some copies at the counter. So
Okay.
thank you all for coming. Thank you all for your comments.
Thank
Tell us if
you.
got